We'd never be anywhere without all the creatives, and that's what we're doing tonight. We haven't got people like Chris Cowles, who did all the original Lake Pedder artwork, posters, stickers, books on Pedder, and absolutely made the whole campaign, which was a little sort of motley crew of ratbags, including yours truly, and a lot more established people in the community. But without the real professional input of people like Chris Cowles, the graphic designer, who did really professional work and made our little organisation look so professional. And you've seen some of the older work that's here, that's been done by many of the others that contributed. So that's leading into the creatives tonight, and the first one I'm going to introduce is Tabatha. So Tabatha is a bushwalker, a wilderness photographer, but more than that, she's all now doing our social media, and more than that, she's a volunteer, and she spent all day here, for example, today, just for people that were coming in. So I'd like to introduce Tabatha and get her to tell a little bit about what inspired her about Lake Pedder.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm Tabatha. I suppose like most Tasmanians with an interest in photography, Lake Johannes was someone whose work I looked at and I knew of, and through that you hear of Lake Pedder and the loss, but I didn't know a lot about it, and there wasn't an awful lot of information really out there. So there was one day in particular that there was a spot just from the upper Florentine Valley that I'd been planning for weeks to go and photograph first thing in the morning when it was misty and the light was shining on it perfectly, and it was just on this ridge. And the day finally came when I could go out there and photograph it. And I got on my mountain bike, rode up this old logging trail, and before I even got to the spot, everything was gone.
Well,
Like it was just flattened, and there was absolutely nothing left. And just the grief that I felt inside was unlike anything else. So I was just absolutely devastated, just pushed my bike back to the car and kept driving down the Gordon Road, and ended up at Ted's Beach at the impoundment of Lake Pedder. And I was just sitting there watching it, looking at the clouds go by, and the ghostly like skeleton trees on this place, and I couldn't help but think what that was hiding underneath it, that the past, and how I felt that day to see this beautiful spot that I'd planned for months, that you become so familiar with, how everyone had felt when Lake Pedder was inundated, and the significance of that is one of the greatest things of a national icon. So to lose that, the feeling that they must have gone through, and all these years later to still hold on to that was incredible. So I actually, on the way back, stopped at the upper Florentine Valley blockade. It was there on the side of the road, and it said, have a cup of tea. I was like, that's exactly what I feel like at the moment. Got out and started talking to the people at the blockade, and it completely demolished any idea or preconception that I had about activists and people on the front line standing up for nature. These were just ordinary people who had either left their job, had previously worked as a part of the logging industry and weren't happy with it, and they were all there to try and protect it. And so from that, I thought, I've got to, I have to start doing something. I have a camera, I take photos, I should be documenting things, I should be documenting things after they happen, but sadly also before things might happen and these places are destroyed. And as a part of that, I started looking more into Lake Pedder and what it was, how everything happened, and just to see how corrupt it was, that people had died trying to save this place. But also the possibility in reading Jamie Kirkpatrick's report that it could be restored and that was possible. And it just was this enlightening sense of hope that we can physically restore it by some miracle, that the dunes are still intact and there's still peat soil there. That just if we had that political will, it was actually possible. And I think, so now while I stay involved is, we see the destruction of places or potential future destructions of places like the Tarkine and the Halls Island and the potential of huts in really sacred places like the Walls, the South Coast Track, places that they just do not belong and completely self-defeating the purpose of putting them there. It's so important that at some point we have to make a step forward in restoring the places that we have already destroyed. And in doing that, hopefully somehow we will move away from this destruction tendency that's just so embedded in the Tasmanian way that we can start to move forward. So in a time when there's climate change and we need resilient ecosystems, it's just ironic that we have the possibility to restore Lake Pedder, which initiated the Greens movement, and the protection of wild places, that we could actually use that to be the turning point for restoring these places and protecting them.
Thanks. Has anybody got questions that lead on from that? We were hearing from Christina, next year is the beginning of the UN decade of ecosystems restoration, and we're really hoping that Pedder is going to become one of the UN projects. Christine's planning to travel to the south of France where there'll be a big conference in, I think, May of next year, and we're hoping that the sorts of things that Tabatha was saying can actually become part of a worldwide push and get the government to really take notice. And by the time 50 years we're up of Lake Pedder disappearing under the water, we will have some commitments to see it start to reappear.
Michael Hodgman said in 1971, I'd hate to think what my children and grandchildren are going to say of our generation for doing what we've done. And it may be that we benefit the state in the short term, but we'll undoubtedly destroy some of our most national icons, and they're irreplaceable. And that's what we've done. It's kind of ironic now because his child is Premier, and we're kind of going to be self-defeating some things through the EOI process should any of those proceed. So
Hillary, at the background.
I'll just say it's by great good fortune that it was a high glacial lake that is possible to restore. We're very lucky. It's waiting for us, and it's not if but when.
yeah.
Yes?
Just given the political situation that both Labor and Liberal would be unlikely to ever countenance it, does that matter? I mean, and would they have to for it to happen? And I just don't think they ever would. I mean, unless there's massive change in consciousness. But
look, it's quite a fluid situation. Tempco is one of the three biggest users of power in the state, and there's rumours that it may shut down. That's about the equivalent, it's a bit hard to know, but it's about the equivalent amount of energy that Lake Pedder contributes to the Golden Power Scheme. And so, one could replace the other. Look, all things are possible. Don't think they're not. Energy is a very rapidly moving game. But let's try and concentrate on the creative thing. Jess, did you want to...
So I'll just respond a little bit to that one. So I'm the project officer with the Lake Pedder Restoration Committee. And so really the focus at the moment is really making that case and bringing together a lot of the evidence that we need in order to really not get the politicians on board, but get the community both locally and internationally behind the possibility. And then it's really smart political strategy and positioning. And so luckily Christine and Bob and a few others have got a little bit of a clue in that sort of side of things, and as well as Patsy and many others. And so it's really in the next year or so is focusing on how we start to shift into that, using the levers that are available to us to get the political decision to happen.
The Franklin wasn't ever going to be saved by Liberal or Labor either. originally. So,
If Christine were here, what she'd say that we've never won an environmental battle in Tasmania, so it's definitely an international. That's where the UN side of the Decade of Restoration.
right. Any more questions on for Tabatha and how Lake Pedder inspired or how she came about it? If not, we can move on to our second speaker, which is Dan Broun. Dan Broun is a photographer and a filmmaker, and was responsible for the work on, or part responsible for work on Lake Pedder, but I'll let Dan tell us all about it and ask him to tell us why and how he got involved.
Yeah, okay, so Pedder came into my... I'm a little bit older than these guys. I know you can't tell. And I grew up in Western Australia, a long way away from here, and my family were addicted to watching news media. We watched 3 news bulletins every night, we watched a current affair, we watched all of the crap constantly. But I was about 8, 9 years old when the Franklin was happening down here, the protests and all of the ructions. And it fascinated me that this was the country I was living in, that all of this stuff was going on the other side of the country on a funny little island a long, long way away from where I lived in a very sort of serene place in the hills east of Perth. But in those news reports, there was always a parallel drawn to Pedder. And that's when the name Pedder came into my kind of thinking. And I knew nothing about it, I was a boy. But I developed an environmental consciousness through all of that, and I was really interested and sort of fascinated about all of that. And as I got older, I started to understand a bit about what happened in Tasmania and why it was relevant to me a long way away. And for me, I needed to come down here. And it took a long time, and eventually, come 2006 in fact, I finally moved to Tasmania. And there were 3 places I needed to go when I first arrived in Tasmania. I needed to go to the Franklin River, I needed to go to the Styx Forest, and I needed to go to Lake Pedder. And I went to the Franklin, and it was a beautiful day, and I jumped in the water and had a swim, and I was so thankful to all of those activists that I'd seen on television all those years ago, and I was blown away by how the power of those people to stand up to a government. And I was really intrigued by how that happened and how that took place. And I went to the Styx Forest, and similarly I went to the tree below the Global Rescue Station, and I bathed in the beauty of that forest. It's such an incredible place to go, and once again I was really mindful of all of those people that did that thing. And then I went down to Pedder, and this was all within a week of arriving on the island. And I got there, and all I could feel was a deep sadness. This was a lost battle. And I was looking across at this beautiful blue lake. You know, for all intents and purposes, it was a vast, beautiful thing surrounded by mountains. And you can take beautiful photos of it. I've taken hundreds of them. And but it felt sad, it felt dead, it felt wrong. And that feeling has never left me. And since 2006, I've done an incredible amount of bushwalking. I've walked the entire island virtually. I've circled that lake on all of the mountain ranges many times, and I've been to some really, really remote places 99.9% of Tasmanians will never see. And every time I hit a high ridge, or I sit on top of a mountain summit in the southwest, just off there in the distance is this blue spectre of sadness, and it sits there and it reminds me that something really, really beautiful was lost. And it feels, and I've heard it said by so many people, that the heart of southwest wilderness was drowned. And for me, even though I love southwest Tasmania and I've seen so much of it, for me it's just wrong that Pedder doesn't exist in the way it should. So getting involved in this campaign was really a no-brainer for me because I love the southwest of Tasmania and I really understand that it won't be whole again until Pedder is restored. So that's kind of why I'm interested in restoring Pedder. I'm a filmmaker and a photographer. I've spent 20 plus years making films and taking photographs. And as a wilderness photographer, I spend my whole time out there absorbing what I see and trying to inspire other people to love what I see and want to protect it. Tabatha mentioned a whole bunch of stuff that I won't repeat that I wanted to say, but it's basically about this notion of needing to protect something that is special beyond belief. And I understand my responsibility as an image maker, as a photographer and as a communicator, that I have an ability to do that. So for me, Pedder is a campaign, and we are flooded with so many campaigns. So many of them are about stopping a destruction. And I've done what Tabatha's done. I've documented places that are really, really beautiful, and then I've seen them taken away, completely clear felt, slashed, burned, napalmed, turned to dust. And I've visited them, and it's incredibly upsetting. But I believe that's a really important way of informing yourself as an artist and as a communicator on how to communicate your message. So that is why I'm in this campaign. Well, that's part of the reason why. And the reason I see the Pedder campaign as being so much more special than that, we can actually regrow an old growth forest over 1,000 years. But if we don't pull the plug on that lake, we're never going to restore Pedder. We're never going to actually see that happen again. And I'm never going to see Pedder in the way that the people who saw Pedder. I'm just never going to do that. I'm too old. But I dearly, dearly love for someone who was, Tabatha's daughter, or Andy's daughter, or Blue's, whatever, fun. I would dearly love for them to dance on that beach in the way that we've seen Allegus Tricanus' children dance on that beach.
Dad, you will walk on that beach and it will look like that. Yeah, there eventually. Yeah.
You're not that old.
Exactly. Have people got questions of Dan? I'm going to ask Dan if he'll actually show part of his creative work and show the Paddle for Pedder video before we go to the other three speakers, so that way we can stand up and stretch our legs briefly while we watch it, and we'll come back and go into the others. Is that okay?
Fine. Dick, I conceptualised Paddle for Pedder. Yep. I wasn't there.
Oh,
so part of the work I do is I really like to work with people like Jess and Andy and Lou and whoever it might be to figure out how we can do something that will inspire other people. As it happened on the day of the paddle, I wasn't there, so I could not do that. But that's what my work is about. It's actually about trying to enable other people to do good things. But yeah, let's watch that video.
Yes.
I'll just say that in 1994 we started Pedder in 2000 because we had divers down and there's only a millimetre of sediment on the beach. Hard ice is still there, dunes were intact, mountains are still there, there was button grass. The whole thing was button grass. Button grass regrows very quickly, you'd be surprised.
I guess the reason I said what I said is it's a whole landscape, and I understand it will take a long time to make it as it was when you guys were there. So that's how I.
But the beach is there.
The beach is there, and I'd very much love to stick my toes in.
The ecological study that's been done right now will answer the questions about how long it'll be. But there's very positive discussion from our researcher about how quickly it would regenerate. Okay, I think
Okay, so yeah.
Jess has got it ready to fire.
It's fantastic to see that wilderness is finally being appreciated around the world. We're losing it at a great rate. Momentum is growing here in Tasmania to restore Lake Pedder, the heart of the Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area. But to restore it in this age of a climate emergency and biodiversity emergency, we need your help.
It was a beautiful lake, it's a unique lake, and we'd like to see it go back to the way it was.
Yeah, Lake Pedder I think is just significant globally. It's the start of the green movement, not just here in Tasmania and Australia, but globally. Like from here it all started.
I think if it was still here today, it would be as big, as significant, maybe bigger than the Great Barrier Reef or Uluru. It'd certainly be in that field.
The restoration of Pedder is one of the world's longest standing environmental campaigns. It's been running for almost 50 years and we're really calling for the draining of Lake Pedder and its full restoration. We want the restoration of Lake Pedder to be the symbol of hope to the world that ecological restoration is possible and is the way of the future.
The next phase of the Restore Pedder campaign will feature a large paddle for Pedder in 2020, but we need your help to not only make the paddle for Pedder a huge success, but we need you to donate so that we can get ready with our best science, our best legal opinions, our best engineering studies. Thanks for everything you've done so far. I look forward to working with you.
We've actually got a few people that were involved very intimately in that project, and we're going to ask Andy to be speaking in a second. But before I do, I'd also like to acknowledge Sophie, who's here tonight, whose parents provided the banner from the Works Printing Company, the Restore Lake Pedder banner. So thank you very much, Sophie. It's not forgotten and it's greatly appreciated. These things don't just happen overnight, but they take a lot of effort from a lot of people, a lot of commitment, and we like to try and remember them all, but we won't. Look, let's move on. Who would like to be next? Andy, probably both Andy and Lou here were both involved in the paddle for Pedder. Who's going to go first?
Yeah, I can go next, and then the thing about that video, that banner is actually quite big. That was the thing that amazed me, because there had to be a bit of preparation done to that banner to be able to raise it up from the kayaks. Had to put these sleeves onto it with eyelets so that we could slide the paddles into it and hold it up. And that banner was about as long as this room is, and it was a windy day out on the lake. So it's great when, you know, some people come up with these brilliant ideas and kind of jump on board and go, yeah, that's a great idea, let's go do it. And you get out there, you're like, how the hell are we going to do that? Yeah, and that's, I guess, where my talent comes in, is I'm good at visualizing and good at making these things kind of reality. I love coming up with ridiculous ideas that other people would look at and go, you must be crazy, like it must be silly to even try that, it's not possible. But then it's amazing what you can make possible if you set yourself to it. And I definitely think that the restoration of Pedder falls into this category. I think what a lot of people struggle with is it possible? And I believe it is. Doesn't mean it is, but I believe it, so that's good enough reason for me to get involved in it. So
your background, Andy?
Yeah, so to my background, I guess, I've moved to Tassie about 6 years ago to become a wilderness guide on the overland track. I was born in Hungary, so grew up in a place that's very flat, has no water, to a very mountainous island where I live now. Couldn't really get further from Hungary if you tried. I can't remember the first time I really heard about Lake Pedder. It was something very much kind of on the edge of my consciousness, and then I saw a photograph of it, and I'm a very visual person, and when I saw that photograph, I've got this panorama picture actually, the posters are just over there. It's pinned on my wall, it's been pinned on my wall for 5 years now. I felt something, you know, I looked at that and I thought, this is amazing. And I've never seen it with my own eyes, obviously. I was born in the late 80s, so the wrong era to experience it firsthand. But when I saw that image, I just thought, where did this go? Like, how could we get rid of this? And it was kind of funny how I got involved with the campaign to save Pedder. Because a couple of years ago, I just had this realization that if I'm going to make my life count towards anything, it's going to be the restoration of Pedder. There's one thing that I've got to do, whether it's 2 years from now, where, you know, the 50th birthday is coming up, or 52 years from now, when the 100th birthday is coming up, you know, I'm going to see this lake restored. And then I realised that the campaign to restore Lake Pedder has been going for 48 years, yeah, ever since it was flooded. And so, yeah, I became involved. And yeah, like, I guess my connection to the southwest is I really love the mountains, but I do think that Lake Pedder was the heart of it. And I think what's also forgotten about Lake Pedder is that we're not just talking about the beach, we're talking about the ecosystem that was centred in that valley. If you flick through some of the books, the Serpentine River's floodplain was a key feature of the landscape that was flooded, and that would have been the home base for the life that dwelt in that part of the southwest. The valleys are the most kind of friendly place for the animals to live in. So when we flooded that beach, we also flooded that valley, and so as a result, you know, being in the Frankland Range overlooking the lake, yeah, there's a sense that something's off, something's not right. It's quiet out there, it's still out there, and it's got to do with the fact that that lake is flooded. And I do have an artwork in this exhibition, which is the photograph next to that television on the left, in the blackwood frame. And that was a photo that I took of Lake Pedder when I was in the Frankland Range last year on my own, and that's a full moonlight shot. So that's taken about 2 o'clock in the morning. And that has Lake Pedder's beach in the shot, except you can't see it because it's submerged in water. Yeah, it just kind of runs along where that, yeah. So I really like that. It's an evocative image because it shows something that can't be seen in a way, you know, and it could be seen one day if we choose to. So I think I really identify with the possibility of this project and what it could mean, you know, the metaphoric meaning of it, of giving people hope all the way around the world. And I guess, yeah, I don't want to talk about all the little details of the paddle because then we will have nothing left to talk about.
Go for it.
After we've,
it was hard. I didn't think it was possible. You need someone.
But we needed the kayak, so we called this guy, yeah. Yeah, like, I suppose, yeah, that's roughly what I wanted to say.
That's terrific, Andy. Have people got questions of Andy in particular? Feel free to ask any later. Perhaps we'll go straight on to Lou, who Lou's born in Tasmania, and Lou.
Can I make a comment, Dick?
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic that young people that never saw the lake can be so moved.
This is so exciting for us, isn't it?
It's exciting for us.
Actually, Luke, before we dive into it, I did think of one last thing, and that's, you know, just talking about the divers. I think it's so important to get visuals off the beach, you know, over the next, you know, well, not too distant future. Because what was the last time that were divers down there?
1994. And that's when the Pedder 2000 campaign started.
Yeah.
Because we love Pedder so much, because when you were there, I've travelled. I've been so many places. Every year I've travelled 3 years in Asia, Antarctica, Greenland, everywhere. I've never felt a place that loved me back. Pedder did that to me.
Yeah.
It's magical.
I think that the most common opposition I find, like, to this idea of, oh yeah, we should restore the lake, we will never be able to restore it, it will never look the same. If we can get visuals of that beach, because apparently there's not much sediment on it, people think it's covered underneath meters of sediment, but where it's positioned, there's not much flow of water, and so as a result, I believe there's not much sediment over it, but I think it's so important to actually get visuals so that we can show the world that that beach is still there, that the tire tracks are still preserved of the planes that have landed there 50 years ago.
Correct.
If people can see that with their own eyes, I think that concept of restoration is going to seem a lot more feasible than it does at the current moment. Yeah.
So you didn't die when you were there?
No, we just raised the banner and got the hell out of there.
Freezing cold.
It was pretty good.
Solve the next time.
Yeah.
Well, the waters are
So,
really cold in April. Yeah.
I've floated over that beach several times in a kayak, and there's no way I'm jumping out.
Well, it was done.
No.
It was done, and there was footage.
Yeah,
There was an underwater
there's
camera.
Video footage.
And there's video of scraping the bottom
Yeah.
and just seeing the little silt come up into the water
Very
and seeing that there's sand just, you just scrape it with your fingers and get to the sand. Anyway, Lou, you were on the Paddle for Pedder, one of the great organisers. Lou has been a bushwalker and started a tour company right in the region, but Lou, I'm going to get you to tell us about it.
Thanks, Dick. I'm going to talk about my connection with Pedder, and I guess that comes down to our experiences with wilderness and our backgrounds in life that Dan and Tabatha spoke about, photography and how that took them to the place. Andy spoke about his adventure and his connection through that, and I'm going to talk about experience, creating experiences in a place like that, and curiosity around those experiences.
Could you open the door for?
Because the last 4 years up until recently, I've just recently stopped, but for 4 years I ran small tours, small group, multi-day tours out to the Lake Pedder area, providing people with experiences in the southwest and out in the wild with the weather hitting your face or the mist coming off of a rocky peak. And I think that's one of the things that drives me. But if I go right back, my first trip to Lake Pedder was 2008, so it was quite late. I didn't grow up in a family that went into the mountains. I grew up in a family that went to the sea. My dad was a sailor and a surfer, so we went away down the coast on the family boat, down the channel, and that was my connection with nature, snorkeling and diving and surfing and being on the coastline. I then started studying engineering, and it was on an engineering excursion to the Gordon Dam to look at the marble, and it is a marble. I think it is an engineering masterpiece. So that is out there at Lake Gordon, and that was the first time I visited the lake, and it was a pretty typical southwest day in August. It was wet. I don't know if you could really see the impoundment out the window for the condensation, and then we spent the majority of our time actually underground in the power station. And then time sort of went by, 4 or 5 years. I went travelling for a little while, learned a few things about myself, what I like to do. And when I got back to Tasmania, an opportunity came up to work as a wilderness tour guide, taking guided tours for another company up on the northeast coast of Tasmania. Between that and some guided tours in Central Australia, my mindset started to shift. Thinking through some experiences, I started no longer looking at nature as sometimes a resource. I think there's a habit of people that work in industry to look at a tree and see it as a resource. Wow, you've got a beautiful house out of that. Perhaps they looked at these valleys and thought, oh yeah, that's a great one for damming. We could really boost the economy of this island of ours with that. But then through the experiences of being a bushwalking guide, becoming connected to the place by learning that, for me it's about learning about the surroundings I'm in, the names of the plants, the geology, the stories of the people that had also walked along those areas. My perception started to shift, and my focus. It's like I was wearing a different pair of goggles. Now when I look at a tree, it is a resource, but it's a resource of enjoyment and wonderment as I look at all the little life forms that are crawling on these minuscule valleys along the bark, or if I'm looking at a flower, I'm taking it in for the beauty that it is, grand landscape. And I loved that so much. I felt like I really found something that I really enjoyed, and a crazy friend of mine, Cody McCracken, he proposed that we could do this for ourselves. We could start a business and take tours somewhere in Tasmania and turn it into something really special. That went on hold, and then an opportunity came up out at Lake Pedder. The Pedder Wilderness Lodge had just been revamped, and we went on a day visit out there. And I remember thinking, I don't know about this Lake Pedder place. I've been there once before. It doesn't sound that wonderful to me. But we went out on a trip. We went to the State Library. We booked out, maybe a dozen books about Lake Pedder, Florentine Valley, Mount Field. We got as much information as we could. We took our swags, we took our hiking gear, we took our sea kayaks, and we went out there and we spent over a period of a month, probably a good 2 weeks out there, just hiking almost any trail we could. The first trail we did was the hike into Lake Judd. It's not a very pleasant experience for a tour, but it was a good one. We got pretty muddy. Then the next day we were hiking up Mount Eliza, and as you're hiking up those quartzite steps, you start seeing traces of this pink quartzite sand. It's something that you've never seen before. And if you turn around, you're looking at the impoundment of Lake Pedder, which to me I do see beauty in. I think it is a beautiful place. I think water, mountains, the reflections is a beautiful thing. But there was also the wonderment. We had just started to learn about this original Lake Pedder, and like Andy said, when you look at that section, the Pedder Strait, where Lake Pedder used to be, you can't help but put your virtual reality goggles on and just think, wow, imagine what it'd be like to be looking down over that beach right now, over the original lake sitting there. And so we ended up creating a tour that we were really proud of. And as we were putting it together, we were wondering, what moves are we going to make about the restoration of Pedder. And that's when we first started talking with Dick. It was about 5 years ago. He encouraged us to get involved, to reach out and help out where we could. And we sort of didn't intentionally do it, but I think we started to contribute in our own little way. And it's commercialisation of the wilderness area, that's true, but we were doing it as low impact as we could, and the benefits that came out of that were spreading this name of Lake Pedder into a lot of places. We had publications across Australia, and we had publications internationally as well. And then we had a lot of guests, we had 150 guests over those few years that came down, and we had the opportunity to share with them the wilderness experiences that we so loved. That was one of our main motivators about taking the tours, was about trying to share that joy that you get when you find yourself out in the wilderness and you come around a bend and you see a vista for the first time, or some piece of nature, a bird, a wedge-tailed eagle cruises over you as you're coming down off of the mountain summit. Pure joy rushing through you. But it was also about sharing the Pedder story, and that was one of my favourite parts of the Pedder trips. first day, we've been to Mount Field, we've shared some stories there about World Heritage value and those sorts of things, but then that night we'd sit around the coffee table and we'd get out our books, we'd get out Pedder Dreaming, we'd get out the Southwest book, we'd get out an old map of the Lake Pedder area, and we'd tell the story from start to finish, and you'd have a group of people, 10 people, just completely engrossed, because it's a very, very captivating story, from the near billion-year-old geology to the environmental battle in the 60s, with the murders of some people, gunshots into Parliament House, the beginnings of environmental groups, and then where we're at today, with it's sitting under the lake, but there's so much curiosity about what could come from this into the future, and that was some of the conversations we'd have as we kayaked on the Pedder impoundment. What would the experiences be like for the people that got to visit, or get to visit, as I like to say, the Lake Pedder beach into the future?
Great, thanks Lou.
Something like that.
Questions for Lou?
I think what Lou said right at the end there is a lot of us, and most people in this room, haven't experienced Pedder as it was. But the experience of paddling over the top, of camping on the beach looking out at the vista, albeit 15 metres above, provides a way of thinking that is really important for younger people, because so much of our thinking is dominated about the immediacy of our lives and what we're going to be doing in 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year's time. But very few people today are thinking about how they can contribute to something that is going to provide lasting value for generations beyond our generation. And when you walk in wild places, the biggest value I have got from my walking in wild places is understanding that I'm walking through a cultural landscape, a place that the previous custodians of didn't just live in, but planned how it looked for not their generation, but generations beyond and beyond and beyond and beyond. And this is something that is completely foreign to most of us. We do not comprehend. Come in, guys. One of the things that we're lacking as a modern society is the ability to think beyond our own generation, and how, in particular with the natural landscape, we allow that to look. We contribute to the natural landscape in a really negative way through our daily activity. But with Pedder, we have an opportunity to band together to do some landscape restoration that will benefit people far into the future. And this is something that I can't help but think of every single time I go bushwalking, when I see the landscapes formed by the original Australians. And I think we owe it to them to expand our thinking and start acting in those terms. Unfortunately, just down the road here we have people that think in 3-year cycles, and cutting through that is critical to providing hope for young people.
I just say you're so right, Dan. David Suzuki in Canada, and people all around the world think it's very important that we do this. It's aspirational for the world and the world of bad news.
It's the
And we
kids
have
see
it.
the hope.
It's like that the currently where we are at the moment as a largely holistic human society is that we live in a capitalist society. So like what Lou was saying, that a tree or something has a dollar value, that we've commodified the wilderness or wildness or parts of these experiences in ways that they're not supposed to be. And that goes back to what Hilary was saying, that largely the people in this room haven't been to the original Lake Pedder, but we still feel it, and it still inspires and motivates us because the value of it is so much greater than any dollar value or anything that we put on it. And moving forward into the future, that's what we have to look at.
This leads, I think, beautifully into our final speaker, because I think we ought to get there. Philip is, perhaps come up this here. Philip's a bit easier to everyone to see you, I think.
I'll sit here.
Okay, and Philip is an oceanographer who's been taken a much more creative bent in recent years, and I'm going to ask Philip to tell you one of the projects that he's undertaken using his creativity.
Thanks, Dick, for asking me to talk. I came along to look at the art tonight, but I'll say a few words about the photographs over there, which I took. I'm a photographer for the studio here in the Art Centre, and I didn't see the original lake, but I was old enough to, but I lived elsewhere, and I first came bushwalking to southwest Tasmania and walked the Western Arthur Traverse in 1980. And back then I thought, Lake Pedder, that's ancient history. Now when I look back, I only missed it by 8 years. I got this book for my 21st birthday, so I've been fascinated and saddened by the loss of Lake Pedder my whole life. And as an artist, an opportunity I thought of an opportunity to deal with that grief by using my photographic process, which is a process invented in the 1850s, predates film, uses a large camera, and you mix the chemicals and you take the photograph you make the plate and you take a photograph in the presence of the sitter. The silver grains in those 4 images, which are 4 images from 35 portraits that were on exhibition upstairs in June, of people that saw saw Lake Pedder before it was flooded. The silver grains in those actual plates were made by light that bounced off those people. They're not prints from a negative or from a digital file. The silver grains were made by light that bounced off each of those people. And each of those people saw the light bouncing off Lake Pedder. So for me, making an exhibition of portraits of 30 or 40 people that saw Lake Pedder was my way of connecting me and potentially other people who look at those portraits to the lake through 2 degrees of separation. It's the closest we can get to the lake in physics terms for those of us that haven't seen it without actually having seen it. So 3 of the people in that exhibition are in this room, and I feel better having met the people that were lucky enough to have seen the lake, to have walked in, passionate about it enough to want to see it restored. There's a cross-section of the community, some of whom never normally go bushwalking, others are very passionate about the sport of bushwalking, about the pastime of bushwalking. Alan Mansell, the Tasmanian Aborigine, who also saw it, is in the exhibition. But I was also saddened by the exercise because I knew it was a great loss. I've been aware of it all my adult life. But I interviewed everyone that I photographed, and that's the soundtrack to one of the films that's showing there. Dan very kindly took me out to the location of the lake on a sea kayak, and we camped 2 nights, and I'd never been sea kayaking before, to get footage of where the lake is submerged, and that footage was used in a film I put together that showed throughout the exhibition of portraits. And the audio, if you come back and get a chance to listen to it when the music's not playing outside, you'll hear some very moving stories from the people that saw it, who were kind enough to let me record their reminiscences for that audio. So that's my story.
Has anybody got any questions of Philip? Philip's book, which accompanied the exhibition, is on the table over there. It's the Green Book. It's available for sale. And Philip's always available too if you wish to have your tintype photograph done and discover all sorts of things about yourself that you didn't know. It's the most amazing.
Camera doesn't lie.
Exactly, it's the most amazing experience to have your tintype photograph taken. So, are there any questions of Philip? Otherwise, look, I reckon what we might do in a second after that question is, could we show the film and then we can have another drink and talk while it's on. Those that want to watch it, others can talk.
Yes, it's 20 minutes long, so let's not compel people to stand there and watch it.
No, I just thought while they're
mingling, yes.
We can have it on and there's music.
Quenching their thirst.
Yes. So one more question or any other?
When you were 21, you received the Vegas Award. Were you in Tasmania then?
No, I lived in Sydney. I grew up in Sydney.
Yeah, okay.
But I came back every year bushwalking in university holidays. And I eventually wangled a job here, and I've lived here for the last 12 years.
I've got a quick one.
Yes.
Philip, what were you thinking when you were paddling across the lake?
The paddling to get there was a little bit epic, and for me, and so I was enjoying the expedition atmosphere. But when I was camping, and the day I spent between the trip in and the trip out, Dan went his way and I went mine. Was particularly moving to be so close to the place where where the people I'd photographed and interviewed were talking about. It was a real connection, and it was unanticipated, which sounds silly, but it was I wasn't expecting the intensity of the connection by being in the proximity of the lake, because I'd been many times to Scotts Beak Dam and other places, but to be almost above it was really very moving.
I hope your stories get out, because when I talk to people, they're just full of despair about the world as it is. When you think of kids who need help, or devastated communities and wrecked cities, and it's hard to think above that, and it's so beautiful there. You just sort of forget how exquisite it is, and how much we need it. So I hope the stories go far and wide.
Thanks,
the old people.
Thanks, Bob.
We can't forget the power of symbols, I think. And Lake Pedder is a symbol that started a movement, and people around the world know about it. It's it's not restricted to Tasmania. It's a global icon. And,
just like water flow from one end of the new lake down here, and also flows out to the west coast down through the Gordon, but the ripples spread right around the world from the original Lake Pedder. So, thanks very much, everyone.